Welcome. I'm Larry Sabato, Director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics, and I've got the pleasure of welcoming the filmmakers of Boys State, a husband and wife team, Amanda McBaine and Jesse Moss. And we're also joined by Steven Garza. He's one of the stars of the film, even at his very early age. Thank you all for being with us here today, and we'll have a good talk, I'm sure. Let me start with Amanda and Jesse. How did this documentary come about? And maybe also, why did you pick the state of Texas? I'm not messing with Texas. I'm just asking why you picked it.
We're happy to mess with Texas. Texas is a fascinating political state. As you know, it's not red, it's not blue, it's purple. I think it's outsized in its own personality, but also a representative of the country and its political divisions and its diversity. So as a broad canvas, it was really interesting for us to dive into Texas. But more specifically, I think as Americans, like so many of us, just wrestling with the question of our political division and where this country's headed, and can we talk to each other, and discovering in Boys State, which we didn't know too much about, that this is an unusual space. You got young people with very different politics getting together face to face in a room and trying to work things out. And we were really interested in, as filmmakers, in what would happen in this space. The year before we got there, the boys in Texas voted to secede from the Union. That was in 2017. And we thought, I think, a lot of us think, are we headed towards a kind of civil war? Or are we going to reconcile and come together? And so we went down to find out.
Well, that's frightening that they voted to secede, but maybe they're ahead of the wave here. I hope not. But I'm afraid that sentiment is apparent in parts of the South. Amanda, do you have further comments on that?
I mean, I think Jesse pretty much covered it. We were looking for a project to explore, the health of our democracy and all these questions that were running around in our brains at that time and still are. But we wanted to do, I think what was so wonderful about Boys State is it sort of offered a sideways way into that conversation by exploring it with 17-year-olds who were sort of trying on democracy for the first time. I think that was a really interesting space, and subsequently has been interesting to show this film and share this film with people and their kids and have this kind of intergenerational conversation. It's a little bit hard sometimes to talk about politics because it's so, just the stuff coming out of Washington is hard to take sometimes. So this was our way of sort of same questions, different scenario.
And the politics is becoming much more polarized and divisive, not just in Washington, but I think Texas too, as it transitioned from being a deeply red Republican state into being a purple state. I certainly wouldn't call it a Democratic state. I think that's still a ways away, though who knows what will happen this November. Steven, following that up, first of all, tell us exactly how you got picked to go to Boys State. And then I want you to tell us when you got there and you got to meet a wide variety of these people, how did they come across politically to you? Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, and so on. How'd you get picked to go there?
Yeah, so I had been involved in my school's Navy JROTC program, and that's where we sent most of our school's delegates from, was from that program. I am not by any means a A+ student, and the application process is a little bit rigorous. It varies depending on the area you're in. I had to be recommended by my ROTC instructor to my counselor, who then nominates me to interview before a board of American Legionnaires and ask you a bunch of questions about patriotism and what the flag means to you. What do you hope to accomplish at Texas Boys State if we send you? 90% of my interview was talking about my grades, because I didn't have the mold of what on the paper looks like a good candidate for Boys State, which is based upon grades. But I was able to convince them that, well, I really am interested in politics, and I've been working on it throughout high school. And they're like, okay, fine, we'll send you to Texas Boys State. And when I got there, it's a little bit daunting at first because, first of all, immediately I can kind of tell that I'm in the racial minority. And later on, I find out that I'm very much in the political minority as well. The program there tends to skew conservative. If I had to pick if pinpoint, it's, more libertarian than not. A lot of the kids, even though they have some conservative views, kind of are really emphasizing this kind of personal freedom. I was very surprised to see their stances on LGBT rights, that were very, very progressive, but in the sense that they kind of didn't want government to interfere with any part of their lives, whether it be guns or what happens, in a bedroom between two consenting adults. So that was a very interesting part that I noticed there, but definitely skewed more right than left, definitely.
And let me ask you two follow-ups. Do you happen to know what the racial balance was at Boys State? What percentage white, what percentage black, what percentage Hispanic?
I don't know the exact numbers. I'm not sure if Jesse and Amanda are privy to that information. Are you guys?
Well, I'm not exactly. I tend to think of it as a little bit like the U.S. Senate in its overrepresentation of rural and white, predominantly white communities. Texas Boys State has had trouble recruiting students from the Rio Grande Valley, from the bigger cities. I think that's the work they have to do, and it's the work our country has to do. So I don't know the data, but I do know it's kind of representative in its lack of representation.
Okay, it's disproportionately white, which is what I would have suspected. And the American Legion, of course, is a very conservative organization. So the selection process probably has something to do with that as well. And that's something to work on. If Boy State and Girl State are to be regarded as the kinds of organizations and experiences that I think the sponsors would want, I think they've got to do a much better job there. But you were there, Stephen, and I think by the way, the three of us who are a little older, I'm very old, I'm pushing 70. These other two are clearly in their 30s, somewhere around there. Yeah, you're laughing, but whatever. We would regard you as A students. You'd certainly get an A in my class, given what I saw in the film and your interview right now. Let me stick with you here for a few minutes, Stephen. Were you interested in how these students reacted to your candidacy, since you are in the minority ethnically and you also are in the minority ideologically? How do you think that happened? How were they able to respond so positively to you?
I think young people, just as much as adults, are really tired of the current partisan gridlock that is so apparent in our national politics and even our state politics too. I think that at 2018 Texas Boys State, 16, 17, 18-year-olds were very much interested in actually getting work done rather than scoring cheap political points with each other. The faults of the program are the fact that there's no influence of money in the system, which could sway people one way or another. And there's also, we do have a news program there, but funny enough, it's objectively nonpartisan at all, which is, I think, not the case in many news programs that influences people there in the real world. I think that despite myself coming from a different viewpoint than the majority of the statesmen there, they were drawn to my desire to actually speak to the other side, despite our differences, and come to some sort of agreement, some sort of bipartisanship and unity in realizing that we're Americans first, Texans first, Democrats, Republicans, Federalists, Nationalists second, and that the betterment of all the people in our communities trumps whatever political ideological positions and parties that we represented at Boys State. They were drawn to, I had somebody come up to me and say, I don't agree with anything you say at all, really. I'm kind of vehemently opposed to everything you probably believe in, but I genuinely think that you're trying to do what's best for everybody, and that if you're elected, you will actually listen to your constituents, whether or not they voted for you. And I think that's what the sentiment was there, was voting for somebody that may not agree with you, but believe that they had your best interests at heart and wanted to talk to all sides to come to some sort of agreement and end that kind of gridlock and partisanship that we see and that many people are very, very tired of.
Well, that makes sense. The American electorate used to be that way, but now they're too partisanly polarized to respond that way. Amanda and Jesse, how did you go about selecting the young men who appeared extensively in the film? Did they self-select, or did you pick them out in the beginning because you thought they exhibited certain qualities?
The process of casting, we called it, this movie was pretty challenging, actually. So the program itself exists over a week, and we knew we had to capture anything that was going in our movie just in that week. And if we didn't have a movie. So to that end, we crewed, and we also tried to find the handful of people we were going to follow through the program, immerse ourselves within the program beforehand. And so we spent about 3 months talking to a lot of people who were headed to the program. We had 1,100 people to pick from. So it was, a thing. And we, as I said, spent around 3 months going around Texas, talking to a bunch of people. I think that we knew we needed people from different points on the political spectrum, right? Because we wanted to have that conversation in our movie. But I think other than that, we really had a short list of needs. We needed them to be ambitious. We needed them to be smart about politics, because we wanted them to have the potential to do well in the program. So both of those things is what we found in Steven. And we also found Robert beforehand and Ben beforehand, and then there's these other things that kind of strike your eye, like Ben had a talking Ronald Reagan doll on his bookshelf. That was amazing. And you have to kind of, those are the kind of things that clue you into something a little bit more about somebody. And then we would sit down and have a long conversation with them, ask them things like, have you ever changed your mind about something? Or, and people surprise you, sorry, not everybody surprises you. These people in particular surprise us. So we knew going in that they were gonna probably surprise us, and they did.
I love the Ronald Reagan doll. I'd love to know what it actually said. Did you ask the students as you interviewed them whether they were likely to run for a major office at Boise State?
We did, and I mean, I think I'm quoting Robert correctly when I say, he said, "Go big or go home," So that was, I think, I think Steven, you said at some point, high risk, high reward. There's, a certain, but that was everybody's plan before they got to the event. And then you get to the event, and we were following 2 other kids who kind of flamed out once they actually got into the context of this 1,100 very energetic people. So, and as you see in the film, both Ben and Steven struggle that first day. So you never know. You may have big plans, but then you have to pivot.
Why did the other 2 flame out?
I think one was, one of the kids, I'm not sure that other kids responded to that well. And so that was his story. And the other one, I don't think he was in the end very comfortable having a camera on him while he was at the event. He became self-conscious, and that was not going to work for us.
You can never succeed in politics if you don't like a camera focusing on you.
That's right.
No question. Jesse, how would you answer those questions? What would you add to what Amanda said?
I think we both chose and they self-selected themselves. These kids were all confident, smart, but also open and vulnerable. We wanted to share this experience with them, and they opened their heart. You see Steven in the film let us into his experience. Robert, you meet in the film, tells us he's lying. I mean, not everybody was willing to be so open, I think. I mean, we had to gamble, as you do in a campaign, that your candidate's going to take you someplace interesting. And we knew that the electoral contest for governor was going to be, for us, the spine of the film, not competition for mayor of some, city at Boise State, but the big contest was going to be the high stakes drama that we were focused on. And also not the legislature, which you see at Boise State's very active, but for us was a kind of sideshow. And I think we got lucky that the young men we selected went very far in that process. But it became very interesting to also follow the formation of the parties and the party platforms as each of those party chairmen, Renee and Ben, kind of wrestled with those. They had unruly party members to deal with. I think, what we didn't fully anticipate was the degree to which we would have a lens into boyhood and the way kind of masculinity is embodied in your political candidacy and your ideology. And I think we see in Steven and in Ben sort of two competing ideas of how to be a man, whether Steven, we see very successfully be compassionate and empathic and listen to people. Ben's politics are the politics of strength, of warfare, even. Those are the metaphors that he chooses when describing his tactics. And I think that was unanticipated, but I think does kind of reflect back on our national politics.
That certainly does. And you could even put it in the context of the current presidential election, but we won't. Steven, it's always tough to put yourself out there. I've been in and around politics since 1960. I'm that old. I know how tough it is to do it. You obviously were more hesitant when you first got there because it was an alien environment, certainly for you. How did you really make that decision? How did you get so emboldened? What happened?
I think I can't tell you, and I can't remember exactly when I had kind of made the decision to do so. I think I had mentioned to Jesse in the interviews before the actual program started that I was interested in pursuing that. But again, when you get there and you see the competition you have, and you see all these people who are running, like Robert, who is kind of like, on the surface, the opposite of me. He portrays himself as conservative. He's, tall, blonde hair, handsome and all these kind of things. And there's, a short, stumpy Mexican kid who isn't the best, speaker or very, I guess, seems on the surface very moot in a way, and I think I realized that nobody who ever made anything of themselves in history had ever made a decision that wasn't kind of a gamble, really. I don't think, anybody who's ever been successful, did it by kind of biding their time and, backing down in the face of adversity and waiting for a moment. I think you just kind of had to throw yourself out there and see what happened. And if I did well, I did well. And if I didn't do well, I didn't do well. If I had fizzled out, then, the cameras would have moved on. I probably wouldn't have made the film. And, it would just be kind of an afterthought in my life. And I'm really glad I did, because then, we're doing this, and I got to have met so many wonderful people in my time since the film has been released. It's it's a leap of faith. It's a kind of, believing in yourself first and foremost. I think that I thought that I could do it. I kept telling myself, all I need to do is get on the ballot. If I can get on the ballot, I think I have what it takes to give a speech. I just need to get on this ballot. And that was very tough for me to do. And my friends were encouraging me, and having their encouragement made me, dig deeper and not want to let them down by missing a signature or two. Just really trying to make sure, like, I know I can do it. I know I can hit a home run. Just let me get on this ballot, which is the most difficult thing for me probably at the program, honestly. It's just trying to believing in yourself and having a core of supporters who have just met you and believe that you can make it all the way there. Out of 1,100 kids, that you could be the one to lead them all.
Well, gut decisions in politics mean a lot. I mean, you have to have the fire in the belly, as the old saying goes. And I don't know whether you had it before you got there, but you certainly found a way to get the match in, and the belly was on fire. So good for you that you did that. Amanda and Jesse, what was it about Steven that drew you to him even before he got to Boys State?
Jesse, you go.
Well, two things come to mind immediately. One was we asked all the boys who we were interviewing to talk about political division, polarization. And we weren't looking for one single response, but the way they were thinking about that question, and how sort of intelligently they could talk about that was what drew us to them. And it was particularly true of Steven. I mean, he was very progressive in his politics. He was inspired by Bernie Sanders, but he was also going in with an open mind and wanting to kind of present this vision of unity, which was so surprisingly resonant with that conservative electorate. He talked about history. He talked about Napoleon in his interview. And I remember being struck that he was, actually it's true of all of the young men we selected, not intentionally, that they were all students of history, of political history. Robert could talk about the Civil War. He had a Civil War battle flag framed on his wall. Ben, as you know, was a student of Ronald Reagan. I mean, Reagan was out of office when Ben was born, but these kids were bringing both a contemporary political engagement to their plans, but also an awareness of political history. And I think that for Steven was really resonant for us, and why we look, it wasn't a gamble. I mean, he's an extremely impressive young man. We did not know that he could give a speech. And I think you got to be able to give a speech for the most part to be successful in politics, because it's about communicating, about telling a story. And to see Steven do that in that moment was for us an incredible surprise, and maybe even to him. I'm not sure he knew he could connect with an audience that way. And I've worked with presidential candidates. I just shot a film about a Democratic presidential candidate. And I don't see, I mean, I think Steven can connect more profoundly with audiences than people in national public office, I think.
That was kind of an endorsement. That was an endorsement, Steven. I think you can put that in your campaign commercials. How do you react to what Jesse and Amanda just said?
I mean, it's the dynamic, I guess. I had no interest in films. I enjoy films as any other person does, but the crafting of film, especially documentary filmmaking, which, you know, I had seen a few documentaries here and there. I think they're very interesting just because I think some stories in real life are a lot more interesting than what a writer can come up with. But realizing the connection between a filmmaker and their subject in the world of documentary filmmaking, there has to be this inherent trust, I think, to allow these strangers into my life and give, you know, let them tell their story again. When filming was done with Boy State, it took about a year to edit, and you know, they would, you know, let me know, they would give me updates and everything like that. But at the end of the day, that film is their baby, and I can't tell them what they can do or not do with that baby. So going on this journey with them over the past, you know, 2+ years has been very wonderful, and, you know, always, you know, you know, very nice when they see these very, you know, heartwarming things. And, you know, I'm pretty, I think I made Amanda cry about a month and a half ago at a Q&A, talking about just how wonderful they're, you know, they're like, you know, like parents. And, you know, anytime I make a big decision, really, it's like I talk to my mom, and then I talk to Jesse and Amanda right after that, you know, so.
Well, that's wonderful. And I bet this has made you more likely to run for a public office later in your life, or am I wrong?
It's been an interesting bit, going to the through the political gauntlet at Boy State and kind of seeing, can you give a speech? Can you, you know, win over hearts and minds? And then that kind of continues with the film, because now a broader audience now gets to see me give a speech and run for office. And, you know, there's been many messages that I've gotten saying, you know, I hope you run, like, let me know when you do that. You know, I have a check ready for you. I'm ready to volunteer. I'm ready to drop everything and come work. I'm not sure. I don't have any plans right now. I don't see myself ever kind of running for political office within the next decade. If the opportunity arises, and it seems that nobody is running with the right vision or the right message for the community that I'm in, then I wouldn't be wholly opposed to doing that. But right now I'm actually in college right now studying government. So I hope
There you go.
Yes, I hope to work on electing people, at least for the foreseeable future. And then
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
so electing them to office, and then hopefully working for them to better people's lives when they're elected.
Well, that's a wonderful occupation too. I've known and had many students who've done precisely that, and they've benefited their communities and their country without running. Though I have to say, based on this wonderful film and based on your role in it and based on this interview and talking with you, I would encourage you to think about running for office yourself. I think you do quite well. And the system needs people like you who are more idealistic rather than those who are simply driven by pure ambition. And there are plenty of those in politics too. Let me wind up here by asking Jesse and Amanda, is your next film Girl State? Where's Girl State? Girl State is in all 50 states too.
We are currently developing Girl State. So cross your fingers that those programs are in real life this June 2021, because we'll be there. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to immerse ourselves in, a girl's state after having been through. It probably won't be in Texas, by the way. Sorry, but
which states are under consideration?
We are talking with Massachusetts. I'm interested in Ohio because it's actually a very, very large program and one of the older ones. Virginia would be cool. I mean, I don't know anything about it, but I would love to spend time in one of the older states. That might be really interesting.
Well, I think I didn't know you were planning Girl State, but I'm thrilled that that's going to reach the big screen too. Jesse, I'm going to give you the final word.
I mean, people do ask us, did the experience of making Boys State leave us feeling hopeful or pessimistic? And I think the answer is, for us, sort of predominantly hopeful. I think the film is not prescriptive and doesn't offer a single message. I think it offers someone like Steven, whose journey, both in life and at Boys State, makes us very hopeful. His level of engagement. I think all of their respective commitment to being of service, to engaging in politics, is for us the message of the movie, that democracy is not a spectator sport. When I was growing up, I sort of took for granted that democracy would remain healthy. There might be conflict and disagreement, but that the system itself was sound. And I think we recognize now the vulnerability of the country we live in and its underlying institutions, and how respect and civility is such an important part of how we function as a democracy. And I think we're in danger of losing that. And how we get back to a healthy place is a question probably you, with your experience, are better positioned to answer. But I think the film offers, at least for us, a framework to have a conversation about civility, about democratic engagement, that's separate from that black hole that consumes so much of our conversation. And that to me is, I think, the healthy space of the film and of this conversation. And thank you for your time and for watching the film, and and for the festival as well, and the audience for coming to this conversation. We really appreciate it.
Well, I'm just one person, but I have to tell you, this film left me hopeful. Some days I'm not, maybe because I'm watching real candidates and occasionally some very cynical characters. But I was hopeful because of this film. I was positively attracted to the people that you focused on, like Steven, but it was much more than that. It was that the system can work. And even with young people who don't know much about it, or maybe especially with young people who don't know much about it, I sure hope this film is going to get a lot of attention and many viewings in high schools and colleges. I assume that's part of your promotional program, but young people really need to see this film. Older people do too, but we've had our shot. Many of us have blown it. So we're counting on Steven's generation to do more. And I just want to congratulate Jesse and Amanda on a terrific film. And I just want to wish all three of you great good luck in your future endeavors. And thank you for producing a film that I think will last well beyond the issues that were discussed in it. I hope everyone has a great day.